Hello, thank you for joining me for this short reflection as part of our Carols by Candlelight service here in Bethlehem. You know, it's funny, isn't it? But we always look forward to the perfect Christmas. We want everything to be just right, nothing go wrong, everything to be as it should be. But life isn't like that. And certainly Christmas doesn't always work out that way. There are a whole host of different things that can go wrong over Christmas. I mean, as I list these few things, keep account of how many of these you have known personally or in your household. For instance, how many of you have found that halfway through Christmas Day, so Christmas decorations fall down or the Christmas lights stop working? Or maybe you find a hidden present 3 days after Christmas. Or you also find, perhaps at midnight on Christmas Day, that 10th veg that you had kept keeping warm in the oven and then had forgotten all about until you went to put the Christmas baking tins away. Or unexpected visitors. They can be a problem at Christmas, especially if you have to feed them. On the other hand, you might have the issue of expected people then not turning up. And how do you get around that mountain of food that you got in for them? I'm sure many of us have experienced this problem. You receive a Christmas card through the post, but when you read it, you think to yourself, I don't know who this is from. And so how are you able to return a card from when you don't even know who has written to you? And then lastly, have you ever found that you've ended up missing the only TV programme that you wanted to watch over the whole of the festive season and you aren't able to watch it on catch-up? How many of those have you known? And maybe there's other issues that are common occurrences in your household that I haven't listed here. And then on top of all of these challenges, this year, in 2020, we have faced some other unique trials for this Christmas. Issues perhaps of getting to grips with the online shopping that may well have become a new experience for some of us this year. The peril of eventually finding everything that you want on this online shop. And then you pop it all into your basket, but by the time you go to actually check out, well then half the things that you wanted and have chosen are now no longer available. And you have to start all over again. Of course, the pressure of then waiting for these deliveries in the hope, in the wonder, will they actually arrive in time for Christmas? And those of us who have gone out to the shops, well, we've had our own trials as well. The trial not least of shopping in a mask. And what joy that is, isn't it? Especially if you are a wearer of glasses and you find yourself coming out from the cold into the warm shop and your glasses steam up, not just because of the temperature, but because of the breath coming out from your mask. What joy that has been. And of course this year has brought the ultimate trial of how do we decide who gets to be together when, at the time of recording, you can only have 3 households as part of your Christmas bubble. If you've got more than 3 in your family, 3 households in your family, that becomes a huge dilemma for us. I don't know if you heard it, but there's been a joke that did the rounds on social media in the build-up to Christmas before the government had announced this 3 household bubble business. And this is the joke. There are only 6 people allowed in my house for Christmas, but 30 are allowed at a funeral. So, on December the 25th this year, I will be holding a funeral service for my pet turkey that sadly passes away around about lunchtime on Christmas Day, so that then I can have 30 people around mine. You know, setting all humour aside, it's fair for us to acknowledge that this has been a very difficult, a very unique year that we've all had to face, and certainly we haven't felt like laughing at lots of times. And as a result of these difficulties, these trials of this Christmas, people have talked about not even wanting to celebrate Christmas. I'm just going to let this one pass me by. I'm stepping back from it. I'm stepping away. And indeed, people have already used that phrase that Christmas is cancelled. But before we think that we are perhaps the first generation to have to deal with trials at Christmas, let us remember the trials of the first Christmas on the night that Jesus was born. No doubt you will have heard comments about what the first Christmas would be like if it happened today in 2020. How Mary and Joseph probably wouldn't have been allowed to travel from one region to another, and so would never have made it to Bethlehem at all. And if they did get to Bethlehem, well, when they got there, they'd have no trouble booking a room, would they? Because all of the hotels would be empty. And of course, the wise men, they couldn't bring those gifts and pass them to Jesus or to Mary and Joseph for fear of transmitting the virus. But putting all of these light-hearted comments aside, Mary and Joseph did have very real issues of their own all of those years ago. I mean, for a start, an unplanned pregnancy for a young Mary was a challenge in itself, not only for her, but also for her fiancé, Joseph. Travelling all those miles from Nazareth to Bethlehem when you are 9 months pregnant, well, I'm sure that wasn't in Mary's birthing plan, was it, ladies? And having nowhere to stay in Bethlehem, and more importantly, nowhere to give birth, certainly wasn't ideal either. And no midwife on hand, and not even a family member, a female family member to support Mary through what would have been a very frightening experience. And only Joseph, and no doubt it was pretty scary for him too. And then dealing with all of these strangers traipsing into the stable, left, right and centre. Well, that was hardly relaxing after the birth either. You know, that pristine, that well-lit, that cosy, that clean nativity scene that we gaze upon in our homes and in our churches and elsewhere, it can cause us to forget what it was really like for Mary, for Joseph, for Jesus on that very first Christmas. Oh yes, Mary and Joseph knew their own unique trials in that first Christmas. And yet, let's remind ourselves of what Mary did at that time. Luke chapter 2, verse 19, we read this. But Mary treasured up all of these things and pondered them in her heart. She treasured up all these things. That's right. Every single one of them. From the announcement of her pregnancy by the angel to that journey she had to undertake, to the unexpected delivery in the cattle stall, to the visit of the shepherds who might even have been a little bit dirty and probably a little bit smelly. And then all of the things that they said about the angel visiting them and telling them that Jesus had been born. Mary pondered all of these things in her heart and she treasured them. She saw them as blessings as opposed to burdens. She saw them as treasures as opposed to trials. And how was this possible for her to do and amongst everything else that she knew? Well, first, because she pondered on them. How many wonderful treasures pass us by because we just see them as fleeting trials. How many missed opportunities go over our heads because we fail to capture the lesson to be learnt from them? You know, pondering is something that nowadays we don't tend to do too often. Most of us will say, well, that's because we're just a little bit busy, and particularly in the lead up to Christmas, we're extra busy. We don't have time to start pondering on this, that and the other. But maybe this year, maybe with this quieter Christmas, maybe with this less busy Christmas, perhaps this year we do have the time, the unexpected time, to sit and to ponder and to learn to treasure these things amongst all the trials that we know. And as we wonder in our hearts, so we have the opportunity to ask ourselves, what does Christmas mean to me? If I'm forced to take away the crowded house and the constant stream of visitors, what does Christmas mean to me? If I have no need of that grand table overladen with a mountain of food that has to be prepared, eaten and then cleared up after, what does Christmas mean to me? And if I have minimal gifts because this year money is tight, what does Christmas mean to me? Does it have to be cancelled? Some have spoken of and suggested. Does it have to be overlooked, ignored, stepped away from and avoided like some terrible thing? No. No. Because at the heart of Christmas is the one thing that can never be taken away. And that is the giving of the greatest gift of all. Christ, the Son of God, born in amongst those animals, laid in that feeding trough, given for you and for me, that we may have light in the darkness, that we may have hope in the midst of despair, that we may have love in a world of hate. That is the treasure of this Christmas. And that indeed is the treasure of every Christmas. The treasure that Mary knew because she pondered upon it. And the treasure that, my friends, we all can know if we too learn to look past the trials of this Christmas, to embrace the greatest treasure as we ponder on the giving of God's Son to this world for you and for me, that he would be Emmanuel, God with us. May you have a very blessed Christmas, realising afresh and anew the wonder of Christ's coming. Amen.